A very good morning and welcome back. You're watching World Talks and I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwińska. On Monday, November 25th, Berlin will see a ministerial meeting in the five-party format involving defense ministers from the United Kingdom, Italy, Poland, France, and Germany. After recent international escalation, it became even more apparent that the EU and NATO need to up their defense and security capabilities. Talking about armament strategy and how Europe is arming itself with an emphasis on the Eastern NATO flank, I'm joined by my next guest, Monika Sus, Associate Professor at the Polish Academy of Sciences. A very good morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So as we're looking at the news of today, there is this meeting, there's this five-ways defense ministerial meeting taking place in Berlin, but there's relatively little known about the meeting. What are we to expect and what could be the possible takeaway from the meeting?
Well, I wouldn't expect too much in terms of takeaway. Actually, concretely, that something will be decided today, because that's not the aim of the meeting, at least for me. So what we have been seeing since, I would say, especially after the outcomes of the US presidential elections, is several countries of the EU trying, and not only EU, so of Europe, because obviously there is UK on board too, trying to come together and strengthen a cooperation in terms of security and defense. And indeed, there is this format evolving based on the Weimar Triangle, so the trilateral cooperation between Berlin, Paris, and Warsaw, to which two other countries have been basically invited and, kind of included to this format. And this is Italy, because of its very strong defense industry and also very pronounced policy, in helping Ukraine, and obviously UK, which is, again, a very good news from my perspective, since the new UK government is, of course, much more interested in cooperating not only bilaterally with partners in the EU, but also with the EU itself. So there is a format that we can expect to develop more over the next couple of months, trying to push the EU and European NATO allies to do more for Ukraine and to strengthen Ukraine even more than we do it until now.
So would you say that this meeting, because you mentioned it before, but I just wanted to dig deeper, is it business as usual? Is this something that we've seen before? Or is it a direct response, a direct signal to Vladimir Putin after, in recent days, he was trying to escalate even further?
I would say there's definitely something new into that. So first of all, Poland is back to these kinds of formats, because we've been seeing these kinds of formats formed by Western European countries over the last couple of years. But now it's actually Poland that was actually the major country who suggested the format to come together and to basically push for more European defense cooperation. So that's one of the new elements. And this is, to me, I read it definitely, as you just mentioned, it is a signal to Vladimir Putin, but also to the US, actually, and that Europe comes together at this very difficult moment and will try to step in and to support Ukraine more in order basically to push Russia to peace talks on Ukrainian terms. So this is definitely something new. And we've had I think one of the first meetings of this format last week in Warsaw, when foreign ministers met, and now we see defense ministers meeting, and there is a meeting schedule of prime ministers in the next couple of weeks, which again can be a bit tricky considering the internal situation in Germany. But definitely this format is something we should watch closely over the next couple of months.
It's one thing to send out a signal of unity. It's one thing to send out a signal of cooperation, but it's the other thing to have an actual physical capability to be able to take care of oneself. Would you say that Europe, as of now, as of the meeting today, has the capability in order to up its defense spending? Because we know that Poland is trying to reach the 5% goal. We have heard that before. And it's leading when it comes to the GDP spending for defense. But what about the rest of Europe? Are we up to speed?
No, we are not up to speed. I mean, we are trying to get up to speed since February 2022. And of course, things got more difficult with the presidential elections of Donald Trump, because basically we have more time. This is not to say that if Kamala Harris would have won, we could relax basically, and again scale back our defense spending. Definitely not the case, but now we have less time basically to not only to sustain the high level of defense spending in our part of Europe, because it's not only Poland, right, who increases defense spending. We also have countries of the Baltics, for example, that also go in the same direction due to, again, acute Russian threat. But definitely countries of Western Europe, they have to catch up much more faster. And it's, again, not only the question, of spending more money, it's the question of spending the money in a better way, in a coordinated way. And this is something that the format is supposed to achieve mid and long term. Of course, I mean, we cannot expect, this format to achieve any tangible solutions within the next couple of days. But I think that, decisions are to be taken, not only among these partners, but also among other NATO allies of Europe. And this all aims to increase defense capabilities of our part of the world. But we need time to do this. And now the question is whether we will have the time. But this is the question that we cannot answer, obviously, today.
It's interesting that you mention the time aspect, because we see that technology that is being used in this conflict is going further and further. We know that on November 21st, we had this attack using IRBM for the first time. We heard from Russian President Vladimir Putin, who said that there is no technology to counter it. Then we heard from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who said the opposite. He said that there is an air defense possibility. Given that Vladimir Putin has given warnings that if there's going to be support for Ukraine, if there's going to be response from the West, there's going to be retaliatory strikes against countries that are supplying weapons to Ukraine. What do you think? What measures could the defense ministers of Europe take in order to counter that?
So definitely what I would say that we should focus on two things. One is, of course, defense shields, so air defense systems that we should provide to Ukraine even more. And they should be, of course, able to retaliate also on the Russian soil. At the same time, we have to strengthen our own air defense system. There is this project of European Sky Shield Initiative, or also other projects that actually aim to strengthen not only Polish defense capabilities in this realm, but also, of course, of the overall Europe, because that's what counts here. So that's one thing. But the other thing is also, I would say, to support Ukraine with as many weapon systems as we can and do it faster than we've done it before. You mentioned, Vladimir Putin saying that he will basically retaliate attacks on NATO allies. I wouldn't say that this is something that can realistically happen, at least not in my assessment. I think Vladimir Putin basically says, different things for the last 2 years and crosses many red lines in our perspective. And then, of course, there is always a question of how we read his statements. But I think this is now a very narrow window, I would say, until Donald Trump actually sits in the White House, in which America, but also mostly European allies, should do anything they can to strengthen Ukrainian position and not really listen to, still coming and new coming threats from Vladimir Putin.
Do you think that the defense ministers are actually going to discuss the subject of the U.S. support when it comes to Ukraine, and not only Ukraine, but also NATO during this meeting? Is there already a premise? Is there already a belief that Mr. Trump could possibly remove America somewhat, to a certain extent, not entirely, but remove the support for Ukraine and remove itself at least partially from NATO?
Yes, definitely they will discuss this. I mean, of course, I don't have their agenda, but I would say that definitely we'll talk about it, because that's a topic that actually everyone now talks in Europe. And as we also know, Mark Rutte, so the new NATO General Secretary, met with Trump in the last couple of hours. So definitely there are talks about the future American engagement in Europe, and especially when it comes to supporting Ukraine. But we have to be very cautious, in making any kind of, bold statements in this matter, matter, since we don't really know what Donald Trump will do. Donald Trump is someone who is unpredictable, especially if it comes to his foreign policy. And of course, he made different promises about, calling Vladimir Putin the night after he wins the elections, or actually takes the seat in the White House, and end the conflict. But I think that even his closest advisors now say that this is not something we can actually expect, and we should expect, or we should fear from and of. So I think that there is, of course, a huge risk that he will, answering your question directly, that he will decrease American engagement in Europe by, pulling substantial parts of US support to Ukraine. But this is also nothing that is certain. But nonetheless, I again repeat that I think we should do anything in our power to strengthen Ukraine now in order to prepare for a potential decrease of American engagement in this part of Europe. We should have done it long ago, but now, this is the time we really, I can just repeat that we really should have been doing this for a long time.
Thank you so much. Monika Sus, Associate Professor at the Polish Academy of Sciences. Thank you for joining.
Thank you very much.
And so this would be all for now here at World Talks, but please do stay tuned here on TVP World as we have a news breakdown with Diana Skaya coming up next.